These three convicts were killed in court, except one who turned and almost killed everyone, including the judge. Here's a case of Siao Angelao, who suddenly grabbed a pen from the table and rushed toward the witness stand to stab the witness testifying against him, but was stopped by 4 bullets fired at a close range by a U.S. Marshal who drew his weapon just on time and unleashed hell on Siao Angelao. But how did this happen? In April 2014, inside a federal courtroom in Salt Lake City, Utah, Siao Angelao, a young man on trial for his role in a violent gang whose final moments shocked the nation and raised questions about justice, security, and the split-second decisions that can decide life or death. Siao Angelao was born into a large Tongan-American family in Utah. Those who knew him described him as a quiet, strong, but conflicted man, someone who struggled between community loyalty and the darker pressures of street life. As he grew older, Angelao became associated with the Tongan Crip Gang, a local street organization connected to violent incidents throughout the Salt Lake Valley. By his late 20s, law enforcement labeled him a key member of the gang's hierarchy. Federal prosecutors believed that Angelao and other associates were responsible for a string of robberies, assaults, and retaliatory attacks, crimes connected through the federal RICO statute, which targets organized crime. In 2014, the case United States versus TCG, Tongan Crip Gang, went to trial. Inside the federal courthouse in downtown Salt Lake City, Siao Angelao sat quietly at the defense table, wearing a suit and listening as witnesses testified against him. Prosecutors described him as dangerous and unrepentant. His defense argued that he was trying to turn his life around and that much of the government's evidence relied on former gang members who had struck deals for lighter sentences. The tension in the courtroom was thick. Each day, marshals closely monitored the defendants, men accused of being part of one of Utah's most feared street gangs. On the morning of April 21, 2014, the courtroom was packed. A former gang member, once close to Angelao, took the witness stand. He began testifying, describing the gang's structure, its crimes, and naming names. Angelao sat silently for a while, until something snapped. According to witnesses, he suddenly stood up, grabbed a pen from the table, and rushed toward the witness stand. The witness froze in fear, and before anyone could react, a U.S. Marshal drew his weapon and fired. 4 rapid shots rang out in the echoing chamber. The courtroom fell into chaos.
A man on trial for gang violence was reportedly shot by a U.S. Marshal at a Utah courthouse Monday morning. And breaking the news, the Associated Press now reports he's been pronounced dead.
And when the smoke cleared, Siao Angelao lay bleeding on the courtroom floor. Paramedics rushed Angelao out of the courtroom, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. Angelao's family mourned publicly.
Tackled them, tasted them, but not shot him like that. Shot nobody else to get shot, please. That's all I'm asking. I ask for justice.
His family later filed a wrongful death lawsuit.
Of Siao Angelao, a Utah man shot to death by a U.S. Marshal in 2014, today filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government and the Marshal who fired the shots that killed him,
arguing that marshals should have subdued him rather than shooting him. But in 2018, a federal judge ruled that the shooting was legally justified, citing the danger posed by Angelao's sudden charge toward the witness stand. Years later, after public pressure and legal battles, the courtroom surveillance video was finally released. The footage, silent but chilling, showed Angelao rising from his seat, lunging forward in a blur of motion, and collapsing as shots rang out. Inside that courtroom in Salt Lake City, time stopped for a few seconds, and those few seconds changed lives forever. Siao Angelao's story remains a haunting chapter in America's judicial history, a tragic end to a life caught between redemption and rage. But how is this different from the case of Brian G. Nichols, who overpowered a deputy, seized her gun, and unleashed chaos, killing a judge, a court reporter, and 2 others before vanishing into the city?
Nichols was on trial for rape when he attacked the deputy, escorting him to court from his holding cell. He used that deputy's gun to take several hostages and overpowered another deputy inside the chambers of Judge Roland Barnes, who was presiding over his rape trial. Nichols killed Judge Barnes and a court reporter before escaping the courthouse, where he shot and killed an officer outside. These scenes are probably etched in your mind if you've been around this city for any amount of time. Nichols spent all day on the run, the entire city just shaken up about this.
Brian Nichols was born in 1971 in Baltimore, Maryland. He was a college graduate, a former football player, and at first glance, an ordinary man. But by the early 2000s, Nichols' life had taken a dark turn. He had been arrested in Atlanta, Georgia, on charges of rape, false imprisonment, and aggravated assault involving his former girlfriend. He maintained his innocence, insisting that the encounter was consensual. The first trial ended in a hung jury, setting up a retrial in March 2005 at the Fulton County Courthouse. It was early Friday morning, March 11th. Nichols, dressed in a suit for his retrial, was escorted through the courthouse by Deputy Cynthia Hall. As they entered a holding area near the courtroom, Nichols suddenly attacked, overpowering Hall, beating her severely, and stealing her Glock 40 caliber pistol. He then changed clothes, taking her keys, radio, and badge, and made his way into the courthouse itself. Security cameras captured his calm, confident stride as he walked past unsuspecting people, pretending to be an officer. Inside courtroom 8F, Judge Roland Barnes was preparing to begin the day's proceedings. Nichols entered quietly, gun drawn, and immediately opened fire. He shot and killed Judge Barnes at close range. Next, he turned the weapon on court reporter Julie Brandow, who was documenting the hearing. Moments later, he fired at Deputy Sergeant Hoyt Teasley, who tried to intervene as Nichols fled. Screams filled the hallway as courthouse workers scrambled for safety. Nichols exited through a stairwell, hijacked a vehicle, and escaped into the streets of Atlanta. The city descended into panic. Schools, highways, and federal buildings went into lockdown. For more than 24 hours, Brian Nichols evaded capture. He was now armed, dangerous, and unpredictable. Police tracked his movements across metro Atlanta. He carjacked vehicles, held people hostage, and at one point shot and killed U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent David Wilhelm, stealing his badge, gun, and truck. By this point, the manhunt had become one of the largest in Georgia's history. Then, in the early morning hours of March 12th, Nichols' path crossed with a woman named Ashley Smith. Ashley Smith, a 26-year-old widow and mother, had just returned to her apartment in Duluth, Georgia, when Nichols forced his way inside.
Smith had never ever met Nichols, but as he held her hostage, she was able to talk him into surrendering the next day.
Police surrounded the apartment complex. Nichols surrendered without a fight. After a rampage that left 4 people dead, his 26-hour flight from justice was over. In 2008, 3 years after the shootings, Brian Nichols stood trial for 54 criminal counts. On December 13, 2008, Brian Nichols was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus hundreds of additional years, ensuring he would never walk free again. But can you compare that to the case of David Paradiso, who stabbed his girlfriend to death in the presence of his mother? David Paradiso stabbed his 20-year-old girlfriend Eileen Pelt in the neck in his mother's car in December 2006 and was charged for murder and tried in Stockton, San Joaquin County, California. After stabbing her, he kidnapped his mother and forced her to drive to Amador County, where he dumped Pelt's body. On March 4th, 2009, during his murder trial, while being questioned by prosecutors about why he killed Eileen Pelt, David Paradiso said, "'Cause she deserved to die." Then something immediately happened. His mother stood up and protested, saying that he is mentally unstable and should not be on the stand, prompting the judge, Judge Cinda Fox, to call a recess. As the courtroom was breaking for recess, Paradiso walked behind Judge Cinda Fox and attacked her with a sharp cutting weapon, aiming possibly for her neck.
Paradiso jumped on the judge and began to stab her in the neck with some sort of a sharp instrument and with a stabbing motion.
Eric Bradley, a police detective who was also the lead investigator in the murder case, immediately intervened and shot Paradiso in the head and shoulder, killing him instantly.
A police officer came from my left, reached over my shoulder area and put a gun against Paradiso's chest and fired.
Judge Fox narrowly escaped death and was taken out of the courtroom on a stretcher straight to the hospital where she was treated. Paradiso's mother said she believed her son may have knowingly risked being shot. For more crime stories, please like and subscribe.